My parents sold my guitar to pay my sister's phone bill, so I left home. And my album made millions while they watched. I'm a 25-year-old guy. And music was the only thing that ever made me feel whole. Growing up in a house where silence felt safer than speaking, I learned early on that feelings didn't matter unless they belonged to my older sister, Megan. She was everything my parents ever wanted: outgoing, social, a strata student with a smile that could melt ice. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid who came home, did homework, and spent the rest of the night with headphones on. I didn't party. I didn't argue. I just existed. But that wasn't enough for them. To them, I was moody, unmotivated, weird. And somehow, every family fight circled back to how I never acted normal like Megan. But when I held a guitar in my hands for the first time in old, scratched-up rental from the school music room, something lit up inside me. I started doing everything I could to afford my own, walking dogs, mowing lawns, even sorting junk at my uncle's garage on weekends. For 2 years, I saved every crumpled dollar until I finally bought a second-hand sunburst Fender Stratocaster. It wasn't new. The finish was chipped, the strings were rusted, and it smelled faintly like cigarette smoke. But it was mine. That guitar became my therapist, my diary, my only friend some nights. When things got too tense at home, another shouting match about Megan's college choices or my lack of ambition, I'd take it out to the porch and just play. Chords were easier than conversations. Melodies didn't judge me or compare me to anyone. They just listened. Of course, my parents called it a hobby. My mom would roll her eyes when I practiced. And my dad once told me that guitar won't pay your bills. Son, but I didn't care. It was the only thing in my world that felt like it belonged to me, and that's why what they did next shattered me. A few months after I turned 19, everything fell apart over something that had nothing to do with me. Megan had run up a massive phone bill, hundreds of dollars on in-app purchases, overseas calls, and premium nonsense she never even used. I remember hearing my mom yell from the kitchen, her voice sharp like broken glass. "Do you realize what you've done, Megan?" But by the time I walked in, the anger had already shifted. My dad turned to me, pointing his finger as if I'd caused the whole mess. "If you helped out more, maybe your sister wouldn't have to rely on us," he said. I just stood there, stunned. Megan didn't say a word. She just sat there, scrolling through her phone, smirking like she knew I'd take the fall. That night, came home from my part-time job at the garage, exhausted, grease still on my hands. I dropped my backpack, walked into my room, and froze. My guitar stand was empty. I searched under the bed, behind the dresser, everywhere. Nothing. My chest tightened as I ran to the living room. "Where's my guitar?" I demanded. My mom barely looked up from folding laundry. "We sold it," she said flatly. Megan's phone bill had to be paid. You can always buy another one later. Family comes first. I swear the air left my body. "You sold my guitar. The one I worked 2 years for." My voice cracked somewhere between disbelief and fury. My dad cut me off with that tired, dismissive tone he always used when I tried to stand up for myself. "Don't be dramatic. It was just a thing. You can replace things. You can't replace family." But that wasn't true. That guitar wasn't just wood and strings, it was the only piece of peace I had left in that house. And in that moment, something in me snapped after that night. I stopped talking to my parents unless it was absolutely necessary. The silence between us became a wall thick, cold, and impenetrable. They went about their lives as if nothing had happened, while I walked around with this burning hole in my chest. I'd stare at the empty corner of my room where my guitar stand used to be, hearing phantom strings in my head like a cruel reminder of everything I'd lost. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for it before remembering it was gone, sold to cover my sister's mistake. "Megan, course, couldn't care less. A week later, she strutted into the house with a brand new phone, laughing with her friends about some influencer drama. "Thanks for saving me again, little bro," she joked, tossing me a smirk before walking away. I didn't even respond. My dad overheard and chuckled like it was all harmless fun. "You should be proud you could help your sister," he said. "That's what family's for. Proud." I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because in that house, my anger only proved their point that I was the problem. I started realizing something. I'd tried to ignore my whole life. I wasn't a son to them. I was a placeholder, a background character in the story of their perfect family. Every achievement of mine was dismissed, every emotion minimized, every dream labeled as unrealistic. When I got an A in English, my mom said, "Well, Megan's GPA is higher." When I played my first small-town gig, my dad muttered, "Hope you didn't embarrass yourself out there." One night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. My mom said, "He's just not like us." My dad replied, "He'll grow out of it or move out eventually." They laughed softly after that. That's when I knew if I wanted to breathe, I'd have to leave that house behind. I lasted another month in that house, mostly because I had nowhere else to go. I'd come home late from my job, eat in silence, and lock myself in my room. No music, no release. Just quiet resentment building up in my chest like static. The only thing keeping me sane was a little notebook I kept hidden under my mattress filled with lyrics I wrote after work. Late into the night, scribbled under a flashlight like some prisoner, carving messages into a cell wall. Then came the final straw. I had a small gig lined up at a nearby coffee shop. Nothing huge, just an open mic night, but it felt like a chance to feel alive again. I borrowed a friend's guitar and had rehearsed my set for a week. But the night before the performance, my mom barged into my room. "You'll need to drive Megan to her hair appointment tomorrow," she said casually. I blinked at her. "I can't. I have a show." She scoffed. "What show?" "That nonsense at the cafe." My dad joined in from the hallway. "Don't start this again. Be useful for once." Megan has plans. My hands clenched into fists. "I've had this planned for weeks. It's important to me." That's when my dad exploded. "You're still freeloading under our roof, and you think some amateur guitar night gives you rights. You'll drive your sister and be thankful we haven't thrown you out yet." I stared at him, trying to process the fact that they didn't even pretend to care anymore. Not about the music. Not about me. The next morning, I didn't drive Megan anywhere. I didn't play the show either. I packed a duffel bag, grabbed my lyrics, and walked out of that house without a word, and not a single person tried to stop me the first few nights after. I left home where a blur of cold floors, awkward conversations, and the constant ache of not knowing what came next. I crashed on my buddy Eli's couch. He was a drummer I'd played with a couple times and he didn't ask questions. Just tossed me a blanket and said, "Stay as long as you need." His apartment smelled like weed and leftover takeout, and the couch cushions sunk in like they were swallowing me whole. But it was better than going back. I got a job bussing tables at a 24-hour diner, pulling night shifts and surviving on burnt coffee and leftover pie. During the slow hours, I'd sit in the break room scribbling lyrics on receipt paper, trying to make sense of everything. My songs turned darker, sharper. Less about heartbreak and more about being invisible. Less about escape and more about endurance. Eli introduced me to a small group of indie musicians who practiced in a rundown warehouse on the edge of town. One of them, a guy named Jonah, owned some basic recording gear and let me lay down a few rough demos late at night. "You've got something," he told me after one session. Raw, honest, hurts to listen to in a good way. Those late-night sessions became my sanctuary. I'd walk through alleyways with my borrowed guitar slung over my back, breathing in diesel fumes and damp asphalt. My heart pounding like a kick drum. I had no idea what I was chasing. I just knew I couldn't stop. Money was tight. I skipped meals, pawned my watch, and almost caved and called my parents once, but I didn't because every song I wrote was a step away from them. A step toward something I didn't have a name for yet, something that might finally be mine, but had no idea how close I was to losing it all. One night, Jonah called me after a studio session and said, "There's a guy I want you to meet. Don't get your hopes up, but just show up." I was running on 3 hours of sleep and a stale muffin, but I said yes. When I got there, a clean-cut guy in a blazer was already waiting clipboard, fake smile, the whole corporate vibe. His name was Brent, an A&R scout from a mid-level label that had just signed a few viral acts. He'd heard my demo, said he liked the edge. We sat across from each other in this dim, smoky bar while he pitched me a dream. Real studio time, radio distribution, a small tour. My heart was thumping against my ribs like it was trying to escape. For a moment, I thought, this is it. But then he slid a folder across the table and said, "There's just a few creative changes we'd need to make." I flipped through the paperwork. Gone were my lyrics about abandonment and betrayal. They wanted love songs, summer anthems, nothing too heavy. Brent smiled like a used car salesman. "The trauma stuff won't sell. But you've got a marketable face, and with the right push, we can make you palatable." Palatable. That word hit me like a slap. Everything I'd been through my family, the betrayal. The nights I didn't eat just to write one more verse was too raw for them. Too real. I told him I needed time to think. I walked out into the cold night, heart pounding, mind racing. I called Jonah, pacing the sidewalk. If I change my songs, what's even left of me? There was a long pause. Then Jonah said, "Then don't change them." I didn't sign. I walked away from the only shot I'd ever been given, and for the first time. I wasn't sure if I'd made the right choice. A few weeks after I turned down the label deal, I was sitting on the warehouse floor, strumming broken chords on a borrowed acoustic, when my phone buzzed with a notification I hadn't expected. A DM from Megan. "Hey," it read. "Mom said, you're still doing that music thing. I need help getting verified on Instagram. Can you tag me or something?" No apology. No acknowledgement. Just another entitled request from the sister, who'd watched my world collapse and never once looked back. My hands started shaking. I stared at the screen, rereading the message, wondering if she actually believed I owed her anything. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That night, I drank until my vision blurred and stumbled back into the warehouse alone. I picked up the mic and screamed into a traw, unfiltered, half sung, half cried. Jonah later told me it was like watching someone exorcise their soul. The next few days spiraled. I missed 2 shifts at the diner and got fired. Eli told me gently that his girlfriend was moving in and I'd have to find somewhere else. My stomach was empty, my account was in the red, and for the first time, I thought about quitting. I sat alone on a park bench with my duffel bag beside me, watching the city lights blur behind tears. I thought about calling home, just once. Not to go back, but to hear someone say my name like it mattered, but I knew what they'd say. My dad would call it a phase. My mom would ask about Megan, so I opened my notebook instead. I tore out a page and wrote a new title at the top, Pond. It wasn't just a song. It was my scream, my confession, my middle finger to every person who treated my dreams like spare change, and was about to let the world hear it. We recorded Pond in one take. Just me, Jonah, a single mic, and that warehouse that smelled like dust and paint thinner. It wasn't clean. It wasn't polished. My voice cracked in the second verse. My hands trembled during the solo, but every word was real. Every line dripped with the pain I'd never been allowed to say out loud. They sewed my voice to silence me. But now it screams louder than they ever will. Jonah uploaded the track to SoundCloud without telling me. I was too tired to care. 2 days later, my phone buzzed so hard it slid off the nightstand. Mentions, comments, DMs, people were reposting the song, quoting lyrics, tagging friends. One comment hit me right in the chest. I thought I was the only one who knew what this felt like. It wasn't a hit. Not yet, but it was happening. People were listening. Really listening. TikTok got a hold of it next. Creators used the chorus to narrate their own stories: abusive homes, broken trust, dreams crushed by people they loved. Overnight, the hashtag Pond hit 500,000 views. My follower count exploded. Indie podcasts started reaching out. One morning, I woke up to a DM from a verified producer in LA with 4 words: "Let's talk." No filters. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I doubted it, but because for the first time in my life, someone wasn't asking me to change. I called Jonah, my voice barely holding steady. "People care," I whispered. He laughed. "I told you, man. Truth hits harder than polish." I didn't have a label. I didn't have a house, but I had a song. And finally, I had a voice. But none of us were ready for what that song was about to become. After Pond blew up, didn't want to waste the momentum. But I didn't want to chase numbers either. I wanted to tell the whole story: the nights on Eli's couch, the way my mother said, "He's just not like us," the guitar-shaped hole they left in my soul. Jonah and I locked ourselves in that warehouse and started building something louder, sharper, and deeper than anything we'd done before. We called the album Unseen Sun. 10 tracks, each one a confession. One was titled Receipt Paper Blues, based on all the lyrics I used to scribble on diner scraps. Another was The Empty Corner, a song I wrote staring at the blank space where my guitar used to be. And of course, Pond was the centerpiece, raw, untouched. The anthem that had started it all. We released it independently. No fancy rollouts. No label. Just a Dropbox link, a homemade video Jonah shot on his cracked iPhone, and a quiet post. "This is what being forgotten sounds like." Within a week, it hit 1 million streams. By the end of the month, creators were using the tracks in storytime videos, breakup montages, and even short films. The pain in those songs wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every kid who felt invisible. Every artist told they weren't palatable. Every dreamer whose family clipped their wings before they had a chance to fly. People started calling it the unofficial soundtrack of being the black sheep. Started getting offers from management teams, from touring companies, even from brands I'd once begged for free gear. But the moment that hit me hardest was a message from a high school teacher who wrote, "My student played your song during class." I asked him why. He said it's the first time he didn't feel alone. That's when I realized this wasn't just music. It was revenge in the form of melody, and my parents were about to see it unfold in full. Surround sound? I didn't tell my parents about the album. I didn't need to. The world did it for me. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent me a screenshot from her living room, my face on national TV, performing Pond live on a late-night show. The caption read, "This one goes out to the kid they tried to silence." I stared at it for a long time. The lights, the crowd, the voice that used to tremble now echoing off studio walls. According to my cousin, Megan and my parents were sitting on the couch when it aired. Megan scoffed, apparently. Said something like, "Wow, he really milked that guitar thing, huh?" My mom didn't say much. Just turned the volume down when I started singing. My dad, stone-faced, asked, "Do you think he'll come back now that he's made it?" they still didn't get it. This wasn't about fame or forgiveness. This was about truth. About the exact moment they realized the kid they'd written off had written them. Into a song the world wouldn't stop singing. An interviewer asked me live on air, "Do your parents support your music now?" I looked dead into the camera and said, "They supported it the day they sold it." The crowd gasped. Online, that clip went viral. People commented things like, "Chills. That's how you close the door without slamming it." This hit harder than any diss track. I didn't block my parents. I didn't reach out. I just let them watch every stream, every award. Every kid who said my voice saved theirs. They sat there, in the same living room where they took everything from me, and watched me turn it into something untouchable. But I wasn't done yet. I had one last thing to cite to their faces. A few months after the album hit gold, I got an email from my old high school's music teacher, Mrs. Rowan. She was one of the only adults who ever encouraged me back then. "Your albums made the rounds here," she wrote. "Kids walk the halls singing your lyrics. Would you consider coming back to speak or perform?" At first, I hesitated. The town still felt like a bruise I hadn't touched in years. But something in me wanted to return, not for revenge. For clarity, for closure. I told her yes. When the school announced the event, word spread like wildfire. And somehow, my parents got invited. I don't know if it was through a school board member or just small-town gossip. But the day of the event, there they were sitting stiffly in the third row of the auditorium. Just a few feet behind the kids they used to tell me were more promising. Megan didn't show. Figures asterisk, I walked on stage with a beat-up guitar, not a fancy one. Just another second-hand Fender. The crowd went quiet. I took a breath, looked right at the students, and said, "Don't let anyone sell your voice just because they don't understand its value." Then I reached under the mic stand and pulled out a brand new guitar. Walked off the stage and handed it to a scrawny kid in the front row who reminded me a little too much of myself. His hands shook when he took it. He didn't say anything he didn't need to. Behind him, I saw my dad shift uncomfortably. My mom's lips were tight, her hands clutched in her lap. They expected a thank you. Or a tearful reunion. But I just walked back to the mic and said, "They sold my guitar. I built an album. Now I build musicians." The room exploded in applause, and my parents, they just sat there silent, exactly the way I remember them. I walked off that stage with my heart pounding, not from nerves, but from release. For years, I'd carried the weight of that house, that silence, that feeling of being unwanted. And now, with one act, I dropped it all on the floor and left it behind. Later that night, sat alone in the same diner I used to bus tables at. Different waitress. Same cracked vinyl booths. I stirred a cup of coffee and watched a group of high schoolers huddled in the corner, passing a phone around. I heard my voice, they sold my voice to silence me. Echoes softly from their speaker. That's when it hit me. My guitar wasn't just wood and strings. It was the voice I didn't have as a kid. The therapy I couldn't afford. The only thing that made me believe. In a house that made me doubt everything. They sold it like it was nothing. And I turned that nothing into a legacy today. I run a nonprofit that donates instruments to kids from broken homes, kids who've been told their passions are phases and their dreams unrealistic. I travel, I perform. I teach, but most importantly, I listen. Because I know what it feels like when no one does. My parents. I haven't spoken to them since the school event. They sent a card once. "We're proud of you. Hope you'll come home someday." I didn't respond. Because I already am home. Home is a place where your voice matters, where your story is your own, where no one can pawn your dream for someone else's mistake. I don't hate them. I just stopped needing them to see me because the world saw me anyway, and I made sure they heard every note.